Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We've got good, bad, and crazy martinis to start the week off with you. First of all, thank you so much for all of your fun tweets in response to our 14-year anniversary special, as well as the commentary we had on Doris and Deborah and the fundraising emails on Friday. Fascinating to know how many of you also get way too many fundraising emails and also with the wrong names. So that is not at all uncommon, apparently, and it seems like everybody starts with a D.
It's from the Ds for the Ds. So first of all, everybody's phone used to be owned by a Democrat, apparently. Is that how these text messages work? And the second thing is just the recognition that, this can't have a great return on the investment, right? They're just spamming all the time to people's phones who are probably, may never donated to any candidate, and they hate it, and they delete it, or they send back snarky messages like I do. This can't be a good idea. This can't be cost effective or worthwhile. But apparently they keep doing it. So
no, it's amazing. And Doris got another series of emails actually over the weekend. My favorite one was from Tim Walz, who wanted to give Kamala a birthday present because her birthday was over the weekend, and the birthday present he wanted to give her was the list of people who have recently donated to the campaign, and Doris is not on there yet. And I'm sorry to tell Kamala for her birthday, Doris still ain't on there. So. Good try.
Oh, Tim, you shouldn't have. This is the best gift I could have. We're on the same campaign, right? You understand that I already have the same list that you're you didn't have to print it anyway. Okay.
We're not dealing with the sharpest knives in the drawer here, but Jim, sorry about your Jets last night. It seemed promising in the beginning. I feel like your schedule eases up a little bit the rest of the season, so I think hope is still alive, but I know you're not where you wanted to be.
No, it's a traditional Jets season if you're out of the playoffs by Halloween. I know you're saying they lost. I thought, Greg, the Bears had neither of our teams played because the Bears had a bye week and the Jets just didn't show up.
Our good martini is the CATO Institute is out with its brand new fiscal policy report card on America's governors 2024. And so what this report card does is evaluate each governor, except for two, Landry in Louisiana, because he just got there. And also, for some reason, Alaska is not evaluated here. But the other 48 states are. And they grade them on spending, revenue, and basically largely what you've done with the tax code. Have you simplified it into fewer brackets? Have you cut corporate and personal tax rates and that sort of thing? And so then they give you grades. And they do grade on a curve here. But in terms of the A's, there are 6 governors who got A's, all of them Republicans. Kim Reynolds of Iowa leading the way, followed by Jim Pillen of Nebraska, Jim Justice, West Virginia, Sarah Huckabee Sanders of Arkansas, South Dakota, Kristi Noem, and Montana, Greg Gianforte. The B's are pretty evenly split, 5-4 Republicans versus Democrats. The C's, 13-4 Republicans. And then the D's, only 1 Republican. That would be Mike Parson in Missouri. And then 9 Democrats. And then all 6 governors who got an F are Democrats, including Tim Walz in Minnesota. So, Jim, this doesn't come probably as a huge surprise when you think of fiscal discipline. But in terms of evaluating who cares most about the taxpayer dollar, it looks like we figured out who the governors are that actually care about that, and we shouldn't be surprised that the Republicans lead the way. Big league. Yeah,
well, first of all, heads up. This is going to be a rough podcast for Tim Walz. We're just getting started here. Not surprising that the only A-rated governors are Republicans. Even at the state level, Democrats don't really focus on fiscal, certainly not fiscal conservatism, anything we traditional, free market economics or anything like that. It is a tax and spend race to the bottom, you could argue. The other thing which I think we periodically overlook here, and I feel like the spending rates discussed in this report kind of indicate, as bad as COVID was, if you were a governor, you just got this gusher of cash from the federal government, and it just kept coming, and it just kept. And most infrastructure deal, most of the giant spending that the Biden administration has authorized has involved massive amounts of money going to the state governments who are supposed to distribute to the local governments who are supposed to distribute it either for construction companies for infrastructure or to nonprofits to administrate programs and stuff like that. And so one of the things that I noticed when I was looking over Tim Walz's record as governor is that, fiscally, he's on easy street. It's not just that the economy was doing well enough to have decent tax revenues coming in. It's that the federal government kept saying, "Oh, you got some money. Here's a giant pile of money, and just do whatever you want with it. It's going to be fine." These Democratic governors, they don't realize how good they have it. Now, I know that the traditional Democratic move is to try to we're going to increase spending because it's an emergency, and then we're going to try to turn that into the baseline for spending from here on out. A Republican House is be able to mitigate that somewhat, not more nearly where we'd like it to be, but just kind of this recognition that, it's about what you'd expect at the state level, too. Also going to take a minor note. Look, our governor, Glenn Youngkin, getting a B. That's certainly nothing to sneeze at. Slightly disappointed because we just have very high standards. And I note that it talked about business incentive programs. And this is a way where I think there are a decent number of Republican governors who are basically it's like carve-outs in the tax code for particular industries. As much as I like watching movies, I hate hearing about subsidies for movie production. They never pay off in the long. There are a handful of states. Georgia can say we've moved a ton of film production to Georgia. By the way, little known fact: a whole bunch of the Marvel movies actually get filmed in the Georgia area. Savannah, by the way, which I was just down visiting my parents earlier this year. The tour guide was talking about how it is now one of the biggest film production. Savannah, right? And of course, everything else is filmed in Vancouver these days. Sorry, Hollywood. But you point out, I get that, but a whole bunch of places have offered it. I think Louisiana, my favorite governor, Bobby Jindal, put this into effect. You're not creating permanent jobs because film productions are temporary, and it very rarely pays off. The same way there's an effort. Oh, we're going to put enormous tax incentives to build a new sports stadium. Oh, hey, here's another thing that Glenn Youngkin did that we were less than thrilled with. So these are the two dark spots on an otherwise pretty darn good record. He's term limited, so it's not like this is going to cost him in a bid for re-election. A solid record, good, and good to see stuff all over. By the way, I was surprised to see Ron DeSantis getting a C. Which just felt, you can go into the report, read the evaluations, a whole bunch of Greg Abbott, a whole bunch of guys who you're kind of used to and kind of are big names, ended up kind of in the middle, neither terrific or bad, and worth noting that just about every Democratic governor was the Hochul was an F. That's kind of what you'd expect. Jay Inslee was an F. Kind of impressive. Gavin Newsom got a D. Good for you, Gavin Newsom. That's way better than we expected.
Exactly right. Yeah, as far as Glenn Youngkin goes, I would argue that he would probably be better if he had control of the legislature. But we got to make deals on budgeting, and that's been a battle all 4 years, and it will be again next year for Glenn Youngkin. But Tony Evers of Wisconsin, John Carney, Delaware, Jay Inslee, Washington, Janet Mills of Maine, Kathy Hochul, New York, and Tim Walz, Democrat, are the Fs in this report. And just to tell you what's been happening at the state level in spending since COVID, it ain't pretty. If you look at 2019, $868 billion were spent by state governments in 2019. Now, $1.3 trillion. So that's a pretty big jump, and you can see in the bar graph a huge jump from 2021 to 22, and then it's been skyrocketing ever since. So it ain't just in Washington. Keep an eye on your state legislators and elect the right people there too. Well, that is the good martini. But if you look at some of these states and the overall trend of governors and legislators spending more of your tax dollars and not being as responsible with it, can understand if you get frustrated in many different ways with life. But this show today is sponsored in part by BetterHelp. And look, October is the season for wearing masks and costumes, but some people feel like they're wearing a mask all the time, whether it's at work, social settings, even around family. That is fine for Halloween. It's not fine for day-to-day life. And that's where BetterHelp can come in. All the therapists at BetterHelp are licensed, accredited professionals, and it allows you to connect with them in a safe and convenient online environment. It's also affordable. You pay a low flat fee for both live sessions as well as messaging with your therapist because it doesn't have to be expensive. It's also convenient. Do it at your own time and at your own pace, and it's also effective. Take the mask off with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/3ml today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/3ml. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And I don't know if you've noticed with some of these high-profile Israeli strikes that take out terrorist figures, especially that whole domino sequence with Hezbollah a few weeks ago. You got comments. I think Lloyd Austin was one. There were maybe some others in the Biden administration saying, we had no idea. And they're kind of mad about it. I can't believe they didn't tell us this was happening. Well, the fact that you didn't know is one of the reasons why it actually worked. Because oftentimes when the U.S. has specific knowledge of what an Israeli plan might be, magically that plan somehow leaks. Sometimes it's to the Iranians directly, sometimes it's to the press, and well, here we go again. This is the AP. The United States is investigating an unauthorized release of classified documents that assess Israel's plans to attack Iran. The documents are attributed to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency, and note that Israel was still moving military assets in place to conduct a military strike in response to Iran's blistering ballistic missile attack on October 1st. They were shareable within the Five Eyes, which is the U.S., Great Britain, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. The documents, which are marked top secret, were posted to the Telegram messaging app and first reported Saturday by CNN and Axios. The officials spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to disclose. And so the investigation is going to look at how the documents were obtained, including whether it's an intentional leak by someone in the intelligence community or whether it was hacked or some other method, Jim. But this isn't the first time this has happened. This happened, I think, a time or two during the Obama years, and it's not the first time it's happened in the Biden years either. It seems like whenever, the U.S. administration wants to tap the brakes on what Israel seems to be planning, that magically this stuff ends up going public. So hope that's not too conspiratorial, but what's your take on this?
No, I was going to say, I think the problem with wondering why this information got leaked to the Iranians is not, could it be a Iranian agent somewhere within the Biden administration? The question is which one? Because there's Robert Malley, who's probably the most famous one, who was basically put in charge of the de facto negotiations with Iran through intermediaries. There's Department of Defense official Ariana Tabatabai. Pardon me for probably butchering the name. She was, part of a secretive Iranian influence group, the Iran Experts Initiative, which reported back to Tehran's foreign ministry. And then there was the International Crisis Group think tank, which also had several folks who got to meet at the White House, Dina Esfandari and Ali Vaez. Look, are any of these? Do I know that any of these people, had access to classified information and then handed it over to the Iranians? No, I do not know that. But these are all people who have been under scrutiny for unusual ties, either directly to the Iranian regime or indirectly to the Iranian regime through intermediaries. And a lot of people have said, why do we have people who are really close to the Iranian regime setting U.S. policy towards Iran? This is letting the fox into the henhouse. The United States has plenty of Iran experts who do not have ties to the regime. That you would think it would not be that hard. Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, they would love that gig. There's all kinds of think tanks, Heritage, AEI, all kinds of folks who are really experts on Iran and who also don't like the regime and aren't willing to work for them. It seems like those kind of people you'd want to have in there. So look, this information was also shared by the Five Eyes. That's the U.S., Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. I'm not going to make any remarks about any of them not pulling their weight as part of the Fab Five of intelligence sharing, but just kind of observe. So theoretically, there's a list of suspects. This was not only a handful of people who had access to this, but it is troubling. It is kind of glaring, and it does indicate, and it also indicates that Israel is precisely it has every reason in the world to not share anything with the United States that they don't want the Iranians to know. We leak like a sieve. It is an embarrassment, and it is an indication. Why aren't our allies sharing more with us? Because they don't trust us. And because of events like this, they should not trust us.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Israel at some point just says, yeah, we're thinking about doing this.
We're totally hitting the north and not the south. Wink, wink.
That's right. Not giving over the real plans, but frustrating to say the least, but not surprising. Yeah, you got Malley and all these other people, like you said, who are suspect in a number of different ways. And this is not the first time this has happened. But if you are frustrated about that and you wish that the U.S. was a little more loyal to Israel and not conveniently making things available for the Iranians to know, be understandable if you wanted an adult beverage. But before you do that, take some Z-Biotics first, because I promise you'll feel better the next morning.
Greg, I thought you were going to say earlier that the states are spending like drunken sailors. And those drunken sailors could use Z-Biotics, because Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. And it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next morning. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol produces an enzyme that breaks this byproduct down. So just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, as I'm sure you'll always do, and you'll feel your best the following morning.
Go to zbiotics.com/3ml to get 15% off your first order when you use 3ml at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantees, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Visit zbiotics.com/3ml and use the code 3ml at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, ZBiotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times. All right, Jim, you promised more Tim Walz discussion, and we will deliver here in the Crazy Martini with the question, what did Tim Walz's mother ever do to him? Because the two things now that we know about Tim Walz and his mother are not favorable towards Tim Walz. First of all, we had the clip from back during the COVID lockdowns, where I think Tim Walz was trying to avoid looking like a hypocrite. And so he said, yeah, my mother had heart surgery at 87 years old, I think she was at the time. And so we still couldn't visit her. She went home. We left groceries outside of her door. And that was that. We couldn't actually visit her.
My 87-year-old mother had heart surgery. We isolated her. Our goal was to bring her up here and live with us for a while. We can't bring her. So she is alone. We're dropping groceries at the door. We have to, because otherwise what that front page story is going to go on day after day after day.
Now he was in North Carolina recently talking about Social Security and how Democrats can be the ones to preserve your Social Security benefits. And he brings up his mother again and the role that Social Security plays in his mother's life.
You know what? When my mom looks for that Social Security deposit to be made in her bank account, that's how she's going to feed herself. That's how she's going to get things done. He doesn't give a damn if his Social Security check comes or not. So let's be very clear. If any of our relatives or anyone gives us this, if they tell us, well, Donald Trump's understand us, that's bull.
So because Donald Trump doesn't need a Social Security check to get through the month, that somehow he doesn't care if you get yours. It seems a little bit odd, and I'm pretty sure there's a 4-year track record of people getting their Social Security checks. But nonetheless, Tim Walz, who doesn't exactly have a sterling diversity of investments, I think we've chronicled that at various times, but he's doing fine. He's the governor of Minnesota. He's got a couple of different pensions coming in. And yet, supposedly, his mother is living Social Security check to Social Security check. And so if that's the case, Tim Walz is pretty darn stingy towards his own mom here. So I don't know. There's probably a couple different takes you could have off of that clip. What strikes you most?
Well, first of all, it is the state of Minnesota. I believe, aren't you legally required to bring over a lutefisk casserole several times per winter? But this is the reminder: call your mother, because none of us want to be a Tim Walz when it comes to taking care of our moms. Going into Tim Walz's quick thing on his finances, correct? He doesn't have a vast stock portfolio. He doesn't have, but he does have pensions. He does have his military pension. He's got his teacher's pension, and as you mentioned, he's he's probably if not. Probably next to a basketball coach or football coach or two. He's probably the highest paid state official in Minnesota. And he's living in the governor's mansion. I don't believe they're charging any rent for that. So, when you don't have rent and you're you should be doing just fine. So Tim Walz is telling on himself. Why is, my poor mother, she's barely, well, gee, if only she had a son who could do something about that, And then just kind of couple yes, because a couple people have made a big deal about this. Look at what a normal middle-class guy Tim Walz is. Look, he's wearing red flannel. That means he can't be a wealthy guy because of that. Let's observe. It is correct that he does not have the wealth that Obama's had, that Biden had, and that Harris has. Harris obviously had, when you get married to one of the most successful lawyers in Hollywood, you're going to be fine financially. There's that aspect there. But also just the recognition that almost every big-name Democratic politician has made minimum $1 million through book sales. Generally, it's like multi-million dollars. So that's how they go from a comfortable middle-class to upper-middle-class lifestyle to a luxury lifestyle. That they are, at that point, you got minimum 7 figures coming in, and you're effectively set for life. I strongly suspect no matter how the 2024 election ends, between election day and inauguration day, Tim Walz will sign a book deal, and it'll probably be pretty darn lucrative. And it'll probably be, Coach Dad, lessons from a, good old, I'm not a fancy guy. I don't know any of this kind of stuff. That kind of folksy. They'll say it'll be a folksy pamphlet, probably, with large font. But fine, whatever. That, he will probably get a book deal. If they don't win, it'll be a significantly, smaller book deal, probably, modest six figures. But nonetheless, it's not like Tim Walz is ever going to be poor. Tim Walz is going to live comfortably for the rest of his life, even if he's remembered as the next Tim Kaine. But just for a reminder, Tim Kaine is the senator from Virginia who was Hillary Clinton's running mate. I know everyone feels like this is part of the Mandela effect, and they have no memory of this occurring. And they're like, wasn't it somebody else? Was it Bill? Was it no, he really was on the ticket. I know no one remembers this. It's been erased from our memory, like the neuralizers from Men in Black. But honestly, and Tim Kaine stayed in the Senate and went on with his life and is doing fine. By the way, Tim Walz is term limited. So starting, if he's not elected vice president of the United States, he'll be effectively out of a job in January 2025, 26, 27. By the way, Greg, do you notice we're talking about dates that are like, science fiction novels when we were kids?
That's right.
It is the year 2027. And,
John Connor's got to be protected at this point, I think. But anyway,
I think by that, Skynet was down and everybody had put all their stocks into hockey masks and assless chaps and roving around, that's exactly the reference you expected we were going to get today. Anyway, Tim Walz, take care of your mother. What? You're telling on yourself. My poor mother, she's got nothing to go on. If only someone could help her. The only option is the federal government. Yeah, it'd be nice if anybody else. It's as if there's walls between him and the mother who raised him.
Spend some time with your mom and buy her some stuff. And, hopefully if things go well, you have investments, and Social Security is a relatively small supplement to all of that. I know some people rely on it more than others.
It's
Tim,
supplemental security insurance is what it's called. Supplement. It's not supposed to be something you're living on in your old days. You're supposed to do some of that saving yourself, and hopefully you have a pension or a 401k or something like that. So.
Yeah, exactly. But either way, Tim, call your mother, treat her well, treat her better. Good grief. Jim, have a great Monday. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well, and your mother. We want her listening as well. Thank you also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Monday, and please join us again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.